And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Digital Dialogue series. We are here with Dr. DeAndre Salter. We are talking the culture of money. The new book has dropped. I have my copy. I hope you all will get yours too. I'm really excited about this conversation because we've been talking about Black people, culture, money for, for a long time, but it's certainly been amplified with everything that's been going on. Before we dive in, I want to introduce my co-host, Cherena. Cherena, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Hello. I'm Cherena Fox. I work for Jedi. I am the program director for Just Boss Up Academy, basically taking side hustlers to being legit and teaching them the ways of becoming founders and entrepreneurs. I also am in the DEI space, and yeah, that's what I do.
Well, awesome. All right, Mr. Salter, introduce everyone to your book.
Well, first of all, can I say thank you for having me on this platform? Really appreciate this chance to have this discussion that I'm very passionate about. I serve many different roles. Today, I come to you as an entrepreneur, as a certified financial education expert, but I also come to you with, from the social standpoint as a pastor. I pastor a Black congregation, people of color, Latinos. And there's something that I've seen many years in my life in business, as well as in ministry and in life, is just the struggle sometimes within the African-American community and other communities of color to attain wealth. And what the culture of money is about, it's really a healing discussion. It moves us towards the path of practical financial healing, because I know what it takes, because I filed bankruptcy at 21, but I was a millionaire by 33. And it didn't happen overnight. It happened through the process of not only grace and work, but also to open myself up to new forms of knowledge, and particularly financial knowledge and education. That's really what the culture of money is about healing families and leveraging the power of our communities to do so.
All right. Now, did you all hear that? He went from broke to a millionaire. So if he can do it, we all can do it, right? And that's important, because I think oftentimes people get stuck in a rut. And, they say representation matters, but really, when you really get down to the nitty gritty of it, being able to see someone overcome and to triumph some things helps you to recognize that you can also do it too. I can't tell you how often I've heard people say, I never thought that I could, because I never saw anyone like me that was doing it. Right. And money is certainly one of those things, and success certainly comes with it. One of the things that really stuck out to me, you mentioned that one of the most straightforward ways we can see racial injustice in America is the wealth gap. And your book talks about the implications, not for today, but tomorrow. Can you unpack that a little bit for the audience and those that are with us?
Sure. Certainly, the wealth gap is something we hear about a lot, but I don't think sometimes we really interpret what that means for us on a very personal level. So here's the quick unpacking. $68 trillion is going to transfer hands in the next 25 years. Now, we have a wealth gap. A wealth gap simply means that the average white family, depending on the study you look at, Tawana, has 10 to 14 times more wealth than the average Black family. Now, that's a significant gap. And of course, we can talk about the systemic issues that have contributed to that, because certainly there are systemic issues that have created this gap in terms of access to housing, which is a form of building wealth, lack of capital for Black business owners, which is a form of building wealth, lack of investment in equities. There are many different issues that help contribute to that wealth gap. So while the wealth gap is important, what's more important is to lift our heads from the problem today and have some sight for what's heading down our path. I call it the wealth transfer tsunami. That $68 trillion is going to transfer from one generation to another, predominantly white family to white family. Only 3% of that wealth transfer will be Black families if we don't do something about it. So here's what that means. For the 20-year-old today, in 25 years, you're going to automatically have a competitive disadvantage in the marketplace, whether that is the capital basis you need to start a business, right? Because most hustlers must start business with their own funds or funds from family and friends before banks will invest in you.
Mhm.
Well, you're at a competitive disadvantage in 25 years if you decide to leave your corporate career and do your second run or start a business or a side hustle, and the person sitting next to you, because they were in the birth lottery perhaps, they're going to have a significant capital advantage like we've never seen. This is the largest wealth transfer in the history of the world. And so I'm really concerned about lifting our heads to start doing some things now to cut into it from the level we can, the very personal responsibility level and personal actions level. And then we can also deal with the systemic and the political and the activism things that we need to do to address it from that level.
Well, I'm certain, when you mention it's going to be the largest transfer of wealth in our history, that a lot of people want to know how and why. And certainly that's what the book is here to help guide us with. And we will definitely hop into some of those tips here in just a moment. But one of the other things I wanted to touch on, you mentioned that Black folks influence many aspects of American culture. And if that's the case, why are our associations with it often negative, in your opinion, when it comes to money?
Yeah, I mean, and it really bothers me, right? Because we have so much to offer the world, and the world certainly admires and borrows different aspects of our culture. So when you think of food, look, we have a great impact on the culinary industry. When you think of fashion, we have an incredible impact. You think of just how we walk, how we talk, how we carry ourselves. Like, we are idolized and often copied. In terms of mainstream culture, there's so much Black culture that have influenced mainstream culture is beginning to get hard to tell. But the one area where we really don't have an influence on mainstream culture is money. And often when we talk about money, it's very negative connotations. Now, that's not just from outside our community. If we're going to keep it real today, that's also within our community. Mm-hmm. Within our community, we're all entrepreneurs. We've all heard at some point disparaging remarks about dealing with Black business owners in terms of negative connotations about how money is managed or how the business is run. Many of these things are internalized forms of racism that categorize very negatively the Black experience in terms of wealth building, particularly with not just the entrepreneurs, but also in terms of spending habits. We all have heard the terms like we're wearing our wealth on our back or some aspect of that, right? Because Black folks, we do like to look good. We do like to feel good. And by the way, we deserve it. We've been through a lot. And those things also often are cathartic for us. But I think the real problem, Tawana, is think about this. We don't learn about money in schools. So where are we going to learn about money? Most of us learn about money through the experiences shared with others. And most of that experience is with our parents or those we see in the communities we grow up. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem, right? Because many of our parents weren't exposed to financial education themselves. So we could go all the way back to as many generations as we want. There are probably very few of us who have forefathers who have, who are really adept at financial education, even if they have financial wisdom. So we end up perpetuating behaviors that we see that might not be in our best interest for wealth building simply because of much of it is environmental and what we were exposed to. But it's time to change that conversation. That's kind of what the culture of money is getting at, is we now want to be known as the culture of money, not just for fashion, food, and the way we sing.
Well, let me tell you something, an epiphany that I had that I don't know has really resonated with me in the past as it has really in this year, especially talking about the differences between our different cultures. So often, you'll hear that, in the white culture, they're taught to just be nice. Right. And in the Black culture, we have a tendency to let things roll off of our tongue because that was the way that it happened in the household. And what I'm seeing even in this new generation, they never talk to their parents crazy. They might have talked to a whole lot of other people crazy, but now they're beginning to say things in the Black culture that's really not traditional. But there was a moment that hit me. And I realized, is it just that white culture is nice, or did they have things that they could threaten their kids with that we couldn't threaten ours with? Things like, I'm gonna write you out my will, right? We didn't have, what you gonna leave? You know what I'm saying? So when it hit me, like, there is a different dynamic in the relationship between certain cultures and their children, because there was this fear. That if I defied my parents, not just because that was the right thing to do, with respecting your parents, but there is a possibility that I may not inherit that house, or I may not inherit, the bank account or the fund, the mutual funds, whatever it is. And so that was really intriguing to me. And so to be in a position to look at my kids and say, I'm going to write you out my will and my niece going to get everything I have and we act together. My kids looked at me like, well, when we started talking to each other.
Tawana, let me give you another aspect of that. I mean, you're right. Like when so look, 2020 has made us all have some extra deep reflection. Amen to that, right? But one of the things that I was reflecting on, very similar to you, when thinking about even money in the very, as you say, the real experiences of life and how certain things develop in our money culture, right? As a pastor, one of the saddest moments for me, having been a pastor a long time, are funerals. Not because of the death, but because of the lack of planning, the lack of shared values and communication, and of course, the lack of money. If I see another GoFundMe funeral, it's going to break my heart, right? So back to what you just said about, now I've also been in many other types of funerals, and usually you could tell where the zip code is maybe different and the socioeconomic status was different because the tone of the funeral was a little bit different. There's some folks positioning themselves for inheritance even after the funeral. But many times in our community, the Black community, we're dealing with the implications of a life that did not have the culture of money, did not have values that were financial, that were passed down. And also what exacerbates the pain of loss is just the lack. And so there, you can also see it there. It really is something that I think the tide is shifting, but this book now will give us all the impetus and give us the rallying points to make the shift happen faster.
Yeah, I definitely will echo that. I feel as though our community has definitely, now that the opportunities and access has been opening up, you are watching individuals who now have access make smart decisions, but it's really difficult making those decisions when you're, living paycheck to paycheck, or, you are working harder than your peers for less pay. Which really leads me to the other points that I really found pretty intriguing. You mentioned the 3 community values you put forth are own more, know more, and pass down more. I think that is extremely important, but you also can't do those things unless you're in a position where you actually have access. How will these values, in your opinion, help secure better financial people for Black people, or how can they really put those 3 tips to use?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things I talk about in the book is how we develop our money behaviors. And in fact, we walk through a process of diagnosis of kind of these auto scripts. I call them money scripts that are running in our head. So when we're in the marketplace, unbeknownst to us, without awareness, we're going to act on the script without knowing it. And so through identification, we can figure out how that script works. And the reason why that's important and why money scripts ties to these 3 values is because many of our behaviors, as we've just talked about, are formulated in our childhood, in our teen years, and as we become adults. Many times we're deficient in terms of our understanding of how money works and having good money values. So the 3 values, and our values, of course, affect our attitudes, and our attitudes affect our decision making. So thus, when you see the person that says, well, I don't want to deal, with the Black contractor, because of XYZ. Well, they're saying that because of an attitude they have. And that attitude is developed because of values that they've adopted, right? And so we need a unified set of values that's simple enough, but substantive enough for us to do this. And so the 3 are no more. And here's why it starts here. I have a chapter in my book that talks about why $1 million would destroy you right now. And because most people think they need cash to start on the journey of healing and financial wellness. No, you need confidence. Confidence trumps cash. And you can't have financial confidence unless you have financial knowledge. So it all starts with no more, because no matter what we have, $1 in our pocket or $1 million, knowledge can be acquired by any one of us right now. And we can keep consuming it and consuming it. And I think Black folks, if we're serious, we need to start reading more financial blogs, reading the financial sections of newspapers, buying more financial oriented books, and educating ourselves. I think it's literally a civil rights issue right now. That financial literacy is a civil rights issue that we are locked out of even knowing how money works. So when we're in the marketplace, Tawana, we don't have the confidence to make the best decision because we have a deficit of knowledge. So you can't own more unless you know more. You incredible Black women have started great movements and businesses, but I bet you knew more before you owned more. You had to come into knowledge to open up the realm of possibilities. And so when we talk about access, there's two denials of access. Some access is denied for systemic reasons and other reasons, but some access is denied because of a lack of knowledge. We just don't know what we can take advantage of. And so I see it all the time. So know more, own more. Of course, three things to own simply. We need property, we need more businesses, and we need to be involved in the equity market, because those are the three greatest ways to lower the wealth gap at our level. Three things that we all can do to cut into that wealth gap and have inheritance. And of course, if you don't own anything, you don't have anything to pass down. And it's very important to future-proof Black America by passing something down to the next generation. So that's why we put those three in that successive order.
I love it. And I'll tell you, and then Cherena, I'll let you jump in there. That's a very powerful statement, that you think you need $1 million, but $1 million might destroy you right now. And I'm segueing, and it's not just in the Black culture, but we've seen how many times someone has won the lottery and it has completely destroyed their lives or their family, simply because they didn't really know how to behave once they came into proximity of the money. Right. And so it's definitely the confidence in being able to understand how to manage money is definitely key, because I have watched a lot of people come into access and just absolutely squander it away. Such a loss for their families. Cherena, I'll go ahead and let you jump in.
Well, I was just going to say that all of that and more, right? So like, I think that definitely starts with the education as well. So like, I know that I'm raising a daughter, she's 13. And one thing that I've done, I'm working on now, because it's hard to change your relationship with money, especially when you come from a family, like I come from a family where we wasn't necessarily shown the way just was, right? So you're living in it, but nobody is actually showing you how things work. And so then you have to go off and educate yourself, when really your parents could have been educating you the whole way through. So as I'm changing my relationship with money, I'm also taking my daughter on this journey with me so that she can see that, like, okay, no, I need to be able to do this. I need to be able to do that, and know where mommy's money, know where mommy's money is going. Like, know where the will is, who's in it, who's not. Learning those things, because those things they're important, right? And not only are they important, but they're important for a child to see, because eventually, if I'm raising her this way, then she won't have to necessarily change her relationship with money, right? She'll just grow up and slide right into it, and hopefully, be able to teach her kids the same thing, and we'll be able to, at least if I can't pass down wealth, which that is the plan, right? Well, I'll be able to pass down a wealth of knowledge, and then she'll be able to pass down not only a wealth of knowledge, but wealth itself. And then hopefully, at least we'll build a family culture of having that mentality. But I think that's where it starts, like just changing your relationship with money and the way, and you won't be able to do that until you start reading, right? So I'm buying the book.
But you said something very powerful, and I even touched on that in the book, and I'm so glad you brought it up, right? Because you said, again, I try to keep the conversation wide enough so that people won't lose hope, right? And say, well, I don't have the advantage of the starting point that others have. But for free, here's what you can do. If you don't have money to pass down, you can pass down values, and you can pass down money values. And what I'm trying to do is give you some values, and give us all some values that community-wide we can embrace, because maybe we have not thought about this. And then now, if we just all sign on to this, then now we all can be passing down. Now look at the power of that. When we're all passing down the same values, then we have what is called culture, right? Because culture is ideology based in values, right? And so that's what it is. So we believe soul food tastes a certain way, and we believe a preference for it because of the values we were raised with, that you don't just throw something up in the microwave. You get in there, you whip them potatoes the right way. You cut those sweet potatoes, don't you? Go get those canned yams. You cut those things, right? You put them in there with the sugar and the pineapples and all the stuff, right? So we know these things because they've been shared. And even that meal is important. The other meal that's important are the leftovers that you're going to leave in the refrigerator for your children and your children's children. And those leftovers include financial knowledge as the basis, because we don't want another 30 for 30 situation. We have enough young Black athletes who become millionaires on contract day only to retire broke 3, 4, 5 years later. And so that's because they didn't have the value. So I commend you for what you just said, because that's where my heart is as well.
Yeah. And I will say, like, even once you start introducing your kids to things like that, they start wanting it. So, like, I know that, like, so my daughter has her own business, and that's a whole nother story. Now she thinks she really got something. Okay. But it's like when she gets paid, like even it's something as simple as braiding hair, right? So when she gets paid, it's automatic, like in her mind, that I'm going to go to the bank with this part. I'm going to invest with this part back into my business. And the other part of it is like, I want to buy some stock, because so we're teaching that part of it. Like, okay, don't be afraid. And I think that, like, in the Black community, we're also scared to let go of our money because it doesn't have we don't feel like it has a quick return, right? So we're like, well, how fast will we get it back? And it's like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine. But that's another instance of just changing your relationship with money. Like, we have it in us to get it back. We're the biggest hustlers around. So we're going to get it, but not being afraid, because we've lost money on far more things. So why not invest or, do something to build knowledge or, anything, but just teaching your kids, like, because it'll come back to you. She definitely now, I mean, she thinks she's like some stock market guru. I'm like, girl, but it's fun watching that, because, like, even, she likes numbers. So we have a subscription to Forbes magazine. She doesn't always read it, but it's there. And for her to be in the household with things and have access to those types of things, I realized that I'm doing something a little bit different, and she has a different understanding and experience with money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pastor Soldier, do you think that education is the biggest obstacle?
Yeah, I certainly think it is. It's a very interesting dilemma. It certainly is. But the second issue is within that education. One of the things we unpack in the book under that concept of knowing more, just prepare us to embrace education, is some of what we've been talking about. So I call them everything we've been talking about in the last 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. I call them money motions. It is the entangled relation. So the entanglement between our money and our emotions. It's really hard for us to untangle that, right? So, because money is very emotional, but if we got to start identifying also our emotional bondages to money that end up leading us to negative habits. So yes, knowledge is important, but within knowledge, part of the knowledge you first need, the revelation, the epiphany, is what money is doing to you, how your background has influenced your money. And I talk about two things in the book, right? So you might enjoy these. I call the first set of emotions that we need to identify in our community is Black kryptonite, right? Black kryptonite. So Superman, kryptonite is the one thing. As strong as he is, he can handle anything except kryptonite. Well, guess what? Black kryptonite, the kryptonite for Black folks, fear. Many of us are very afraid to take risk. And this is why it affects us in terms of investment. Greed. All right. We've seen too many pyramid schemes, too many schemes in our communities where those who did not have were taken advantage of, and it makes the rest of us gun shy. Mm-hmm. Makes the rest of us skeptical. Yep. So thus a great opportunity could come, back to what you said about access, Tawana, right? A great opportunity could come, but you won't trust it. Yep. Then I call them the triumphant of Black kryptonite. false hope, luck, and wishing. Now, we love that because luck doesn't require discipline or obedience. So false hope. So that's the lottery mentality, right? And one of the things I talk about in the book, look, you can go into any hood in America. I don't care where you are, in Kentucky, New York, or LA. One thing's going to be in common. If you find a bodega, there will be a table in the back of the bodega and there will be some extra games going on. Let's just say that. There's some other type of bets you can make, right? So, and we all know what numbers are. We've heard that terminology, right? Because again, these are money. But that black kryptonite causes us to make bad decisions because they don't require us to operate in some type of financial discipline. But then there's also what I call black shackles, right? Mary sang the song, "Take the shackles off your feet so you can dance." Well, here are the shackles. There are two. The things that hurt us most in terms of our emotion, I'm telling you, shame and embarrassment. Because many of us have come from lack. Look, this book was very emotional for me. It's very triggering. There was definitely some money trauma that I dealt with because I walked people through the real. And even through every phase of my life, what I didn't know, what I did know, what I messed up, what I was introduced to. But it was very painful to relive some of my decision making. I got to be honest with you. It was really painful reliving my bankruptcy at 21 years old. And I walked people through how the shame of that caused me to make, even after bankruptcy, you would think I would do instantly better, but I didn't, because the shame would cause me to almost double down on negative behaviors. I tell a story about a young woman who I was doing we were in a presentation in corporate America many years ago when I was with Chubb Insurance, and it was room packed, and we were the only few black folks in the room, not atypical for back then. And they did a presentation on 401k, and I watched all the white people in the room ask questions. They were just asking questions after questions. It felt very comfortable asking questions. Again, because for many of their backgrounds, they weren't the first college graduate. These are considerations about retirement and long-term planning that they had previous exposure to. For myself and this young lady, we didn't really have exposure to that. So when she was in the room, she didn't ask any questions. She asked me questions afterwards. And I said, well, why didn't you ask the questions? You know what it was? Shame. Her response was, well, I didn't want them to know what I didn't know. And I think that's a real experience for us. And embarrassment, many of us are embarrassed about the struggle we've had. But as we've all said, it's the struggle that makes us, right? It's the struggle that allows us to overcome. So yes, knowledge is important, but unpacking money and emotions, I think one thing's going to happen to people when they read this is you're going to feel a ripping open of that dynamic. And I think you'll have great identification. So you'll be more in control of what your emotions are.
Ooh, that is so powerful. Unpacking money and emotions. You said several things that I really want to come back to. The first, I have experienced firsthand in our community. We have seen others' greed and how it has impacted some. And that greed has definitely caused many people to walk away from really, really good opportunities. I can count on my hands the number of opportunities that I have put in front of our culture, and they just couldn't get it. There was this fear that there was going to be something taken or that they were going to be taken advantage of. So I think that is something that we definitely need to sit in. I think that we need to really reflect on because we don't want to be passing up opportunities because of someone else's mistakes and someone else's bad behavior. And then, to your point about not wanting people to not know or to know what you don't know. And I can certainly relate to that. There was a time early on in my career, because the fear was, if you know what I don't know, you're in a position to take advantage of me. And, I think I'd like to stop there for just a moment because that's not going to necessarily go away easily, right? There's been people going back to, they've seen others with their greed take advantage of people. So they don't approach certain opportunities. And then on top of it, they're not confident, to your point earlier. So they don't want people to not know or to know what they don't know. And because they're afraid that they're going to be taken advantage of. What are some ways in which they can get around that?
Okay. So you're really nailing it, right? Because what you're talking about is how, if we don't deal with that, so the implications of what you just said are powerful, right? If we don't deal with that, we're going to potentially repeat behaviors and lock ourselves out of greater opportunities. So, when you're a captive to things, whether they're emotions or poverty or lack or whatever, Sometimes you can take affinity or build an affinity for your captivity, like Patty Hearst. And so what you're talking about is what I call in the book, I call it financial Patty Hearst syndrome. It's when the negative experiences with money have taken you captive, so much so that you now find affinity and more comfort in staying where you are than finding the freedom that you should have. And so one of the things I talk about are these 5 taking advantage of the scripts that are running in your head. So as we identify these emotions, how do we then take advantage of them, right? How do we unpack them? And I talk about 5 of them, right? And so, not to belabor them, but I talk about identifying the difference between money avoidance, which is believing money is bad and you don't really deserve to have it, because some of us have money avoidance. So thus, we don't really take a lot of risk because we believe, hey, money is bad. It's too much responsibility. I'm not going to open my bills. If it's in the mail, then, too bad. I'll find out later. Some of us have money worship, right? Money worship is the belief that money's going to solve all my problems. And there's never enough money. So, that person will never find happiness in other things other than money, but they'll never get enough of it. So they could also tend to take advantage of others for the sake of gaining it. And they sacrifice relationships for it. Then there's money status, believing that owning the newest and best possessions convey status. So I wear the Rolex because I want them to know what level I'm on, or what level I think I want them to know. I think what level I want them to think I'm on.
Right.
Right. Then there's money vigilance, which is embracing frugality. So, if I knew grandma and grandma stuck that money down in there and she never spent it, then that value's passed on to me. So I may save well, but I don't take risk well. And then here's the big one I talk about: money reparations. And this is powerful. This is something I'm the only one talking about this because I've examined it and I've, in some of my workshops, I've really unpacked this. It's the belief that money ministers to past wounds and it heals. And so that's the primary purpose of money is my own personal reparations for past injustices. So I treat myself, right? Because no matter what, I deserve it. And so you can hear money reparations working in your head because you may know this may hit the budget a little extra, but you heard it in your head. You go, yeah, but I deserve this. Now, you're not saying in that moment why you deserve it, but we all know why you feel you deserve it. or you say, I work hard for this.
Ask myself how many times I done told myself that, Pastor Salter, get off my street, okay?
I'm sitting here thinking the same thing, Tawana. I'm like, no, don't talk to me like this.
But it's real, right? We don't know, but a lot's there. So what we have to do is identification is very powerful for healing. So one of the things, like I say, everything begins with a proper diagnosis. And if you have a toothache, you won't go to the dentist until it hurts bad enough. What I'm asking folks in this book is, does it hurt bad enough? And here's how we're going to deal with it. And we're going to start dealing with it by helping you unpack those emotions and then those scripts. Because once we know the script is running, see what I just did to you, Tawana, is next time you go in the marketplace, if any of those scripts are running through identification, it's going to come back to you. Now, you may not be able to change it immediately.
I have a whole lot of things flashing through my head that I told myself I deserved, okay? So you're going to need a whole nother therapy session after this. For those that are tuning in, we are with Pastor Salter. We are discussing the culture of money. I have my book. I want you to make sure that you get yours too. He has explained to us that we are getting ready to witness one of the largest transfers of wealth that our generations have ever seen. And he wants to make sure that the Black culture doesn't miss out. The wealth gap is big enough. I do want to get into some more questions, but Cherena, I wasn't certain. I don't want to dominate because it's clearly a good conversation and one that's resonating for both of us, especially as parents. Right now, my kids are out of the house. And so I'm dealing with a whole different subset of issues when it comes down to parenting and helping my kids to understand that I'm not an ATM and I am not here to take care of you forever. Okay. And there's got to be a line drawn in the sand. And Cherena still has a child at home that she's teaching about being a business owner and how to reinvest those dollars. So before we go on to some of the other tips, Cherena, any other comments that you'd like to add?
I'm dealing with I am not an ATM too. And that is it right now. Just teaching her really the value the value of money. And like I said before, changing my relationship with money so that I can teach her, changing my understanding of money so that I can teach her. And hopefully, fingers crossed, right, that she'll get it. But she's already showing some signs that she does. So this conversation is empowering because number one, she's not far from me, so she can hear this whole conversation. But in knowing that mommy's not being mean when I tell you you can't have it all, right? But and then helping her to understand that like you said, like you're not an ATM, and helping her to understand, hey, I'm not. And so, but because I'm not, this is why I want you to understand and have a different relationship with money so that you are not always so super financially dependent on me. And so that you can show your kids and live a life of abundance and have a mindset of abundance rather than just being scared, and being scared of spending money, not having money, right? And having such emotional responses, like you said, and just the emotional trauma and drama when it comes to money in the Black community. I want to change that for her. So that's where I'm at with it at this moment. But I'm sure after I read the book, I'm going to have a lot more when it comes to that.
So, one of the things that I did also find intriguing, you mentioned the closed circuit economy. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, and how do we best apply that in today's global economy?
Yeah, it's very important. So what I mean by a closed circuit economy, and this is not a new concept, right? So those like W.E.B. Du Bois were very into this kind of concept and practice what they preach in it. So the closed circuit economy is the idea of creating a sub-economy where we circulate dollars within the Black community longer. It's really known through various studies that a dollar circulates in the Black community the shortest amount of time. What I mean by circulate, I think it's best explained by a quote by Du Bois. Here's what he says. In a 1912 essay, and I just want to read this, he says, "Today there's a singular group in Durham where a Black man may get up in the morning from a mattress made by a Black man, and a house which was built by a Black man, out of lumber which Black men cut, planned, panned, and sold." That's a picture of a closed circuit economy. It's the idea of being able to do business with Black businesses. We all have heard, after George Floyd, there was this big resonance to buy Black. I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they certainly saw a burst of it, but it waned. Why? Because we don't have a true closed circuit economy. And we're not circulating those dollars. One of the things I talk about with that, look at some other communities, like for instance, in the Northeast where we are, and in other places, I look at closed circuit economies like within the Asian community. There are Asian grocers who sell products. Now, that's not discriminatory. They're just offering products that consumer group can't find anywhere else. They're importing those products from countries where that demographic is best reflected, and then doing business with that demographic. So look at that. It's like W.B. Du Bois said. They're doing business with an Asian wholesaler who's importing it, and that wholesaler is dealing with an Asian importer who's bringing it in, who's doing with an Asian manufacturer in a country that they sold it to the importer, and then to the wholesaler, and now to the retailer who has an Asian consumer. So that dollar staying within a community closed circuit for a much longer period than within the Black community. And that is actually hurting us because Black businesses are, while capital has increased, it's still a travesty. Black businesses aren't being funded by private equity at the rate of other businesses. Black businesses aren't getting loans, even with the PPP loans we saw. A whole swath of people of color locked out of PPP loans and not getting access because they didn't have the banking relationships. So it's very important that our dollars are being used within our communities to circulate, because these are the entrepreneurs who have ventured out to take risks, and we have to reward them with our support. Because, by the way, the number one employer of Black people are Black-owned businesses.
I'm getting ready to touch on something that has always intrigued me, and feel free if you say I don't know, and I don't know. I own a restaurant here in Louisville, and during the last couple of years, we've been working with an organization that has been preserving the history of African American jockey. Really because we won some of the first Kentucky Derbies that they were African American jockeys. And when you go to various venues in Louisville and they have the word jockey or lounge associated with them, there is no depiction of Black jockeys on any of the imagery. And so I thought it would be really cool after connecting with this group and holding an event on our rooftop where we were celebrating Black jockeys in art, like, oh, this is a thing. This is a niche. Why don't we create the Black Jockeys Lounge? And so we were, we're rolling, right? And then an article comes out. And for whatever reason, when it comes down to some in the white culture, when they hear Asian restaurant, Japanese restaurant, Italian, Greek, so on and so forth, their immediate response is, well, that's a cuisine, right? If they hear Black restaurant, they feel as though it's just race. But the reality is Blacks, we have a certain cuisine, we have our own cultural feel. And I'm just curious as to where do you think that comes from? Because I even had some go as far as saying, why would you create a restaurant where I'm not allowed? And I thought to myself, wait a minute, I didn't say that you could not come and celebrate and enjoy the history of the Black jockey. And so I'm just curious, in your opinion, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I'll be very blunt and tell you white supremacy. Honestly, white supremacy is so ingrained in our society that Black is a threatening word. So whatever you put behind Black is going to trigger similar responses. So if you say we're a Black investment banking firm, there's the assumption in the wider group is you only invest in Black companies. There's no assumption that you could possibly be investing and you're just Black owned. If you say we're a Black church, the assumption is white folks are not welcome, don't come. I pastor a church, and we have some really brave white folks that come out. We always celebrate them. Y'all so cool. We like y'all. Come on here. And as I say I've had white congregants ask me, I've never really heard you, really say that it isn't for me. And I said, no. I say anybody who wants to appreciate Black culture and Black styles of worship, you're all welcome. Now, let me make it very clear. We're not going to change this to make somebody feel comfortable in the pews. To sit in the pews means you have to be a really person that's open to enjoying something different than your norm. So I think white supremacy, we see the effect in industry and in commerce in that manner. Thus, the Black leadership question. If you say the minute you're a Black leader, that title, a leader, and the Blackness on the leader, there's a question. Can they lead? Can I invest my capital in them? So we get these questions, but I think these are the effects of systemic racism and white supremacy that are so ingrained in our society that it's going to take some more unpacking of that. But frankly, that really is the reason. They assume we're so narrow. But again, while that is happening, here's where I'm challenging us. We get that. But what about this fact, Tawana? Black businesses only get 2% of Black consumer dollars. And if Black people spend 10% more with Black businesses, it would create 1 million jobs. Because after the government, Black businesses are the largest employers of Black people. So for any critics of why you should be a Black-owned restaurant offering comfort food or soul food cuisine, well, the reason why you deserve that dollar and that closed circuit dollar is because, and we want others to come and invest, obviously, in the Black community for this very reason. Every dollar, white or Black or Asian or Hispanic, you spend with a Black business, you're investing in the Black community. You're creating jobs. And if you want to really heal some of the systemic issues, do your part to spend money with Black businesses. You don't need a sign for that. You don't need any laws changed for that. You are free to walk in any Black business and not just wait for a slogan or somebody to die. We all of us, Black, white, and everything else, we can support Black businesses because they're the #1 employer of Black people.
Well, yes, pass your dollar, support and spend Black. But let's also talk about how you discuss passing down, right? Passing down more. You talk about finding your success driver and your legacy driver. What's the difference?
Okay, so success driver is it's your why you want success, and I think it's very important to identify that. Often when I'm coaching people, the hardest thing with even like new business dreamers and startups is to get them to define success. And if you don't define success, you can't celebrate it, and you can't set a new milestone. You'll keep chasing an ambiguous, invisible goal. And so it's very important if you want to be successful to understand the why you want success. For me, it was my mama, Emma. My mama, I love my mama, right? And growing up in the hood, my parents did all the, blue collar family. My dad was a mechanic. My mother worked in ministry. They did all they could to send us to the best schools they could, to get us access to education opportunity. And coming up, I just wanted to see my mama blessed. I wanted to buy her first house. Which, me and my brothers and sisters, we bought our house. I wanted to buy her first car. I wanted to take care of her for the rest of her life. My mama, I'm bragging. Yeah, she never got to work, and she never really have to, because her children, we're going to make sure, because she's been the success driver for many of us, all of us. So she is the why. Now, it's very interesting. I didn't say my wife, and I didn't say my children, because they were my legacy drivers. There's a big difference. Legacy drivers are the why you're building a legacy in the first place. So you got to understand that. Now, here's what happened. My oldest son's name is Dejan. He's in his 20s now. But when he was born, I just remember looking at him and just honestly a sadness, because I was overwhelmed by his Blackness and the implications of what that would mean for him. And I felt like if I didn't do something to really set him up, he would be at a competitive disadvantage. And I wanted to eliminate for him and my daughter, who came 18 months later, and my children subsequently. I wanted to eliminate as many obstacles for them and their future generations. And that was my legacy driver. And so success is the why you want success, and the legacy driver is the what's in your heart thing, like what's really giving you passion.
Now that's a whole new way of looking at things. Success drivers and legacy drivers. For those that are just tuning in, we are discussing the culture of money. Bishop Salter has his new book. Also, where can they find it?
Well, first of all, you have called me everything today, because it's all true. Bishop Salter, Pastor Salter, DeAndre Salter, my homeboy, my brother, my family, my friend, Deuces. Big ups.
Listen, you need to know the next one's gonna be Arthur, but you don't call me out now.
No, look, I love it, family. Listen, you can get the culture. First of all, a great place to start is thecultureofmoney.com, because along with the book is a very important emotional step that, hopefully we get the chance to talk about, which is the pledge. And I can unpack that more later. You can take down thecultureofmoney.com, but the book is available in hardcover, Kindle ebook, and paperback everywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. We've had an incredible launch week. Thank you to all of you who've already gone out. We're blowing our sales target. We've been #1 on Amazon in multiple categories for 6 days now. Wow. And so it's really taking hold.
Awesome. Well, speaking of Bishop, Pastor, you're a man of faith, right? I'm curious. There's so much. I read an article just this morning where, I'm not even going to go there, talking about prophecies that I'm just like, this isn't real. But, as a man of faith, what do you believe is God's will for the Black culture?
Oh, man, thank you for asking me that. I really, really appreciate it. Like I said, faith without works is dead, one scripture says. And, that was said by James, Jesus's brother, who received that inspiration from the Lord. And that's what happened to me in bankruptcy. So it took work, but my faith was very important to me. It was receiving that grace and that new hope that I could go from being worth nothing to becoming even more. But the real scripture that I really tell people that drives this whole book is wisdom from Solomon in Proverbs 13:22. It says, good people leave an inheritance for their grandchildren. but a sinner's wealth is stored up for good people. So I believe it's simply this true. I just think it's God. I think it's from heaven. I think it's divine will to manage your money better and to have more money and to leave an inheritance. I don't think there's an accident that there's over 2,000 scriptures in the Bible concerning money, because the beauty of scripture is it's a lens into a story about humanity and divinity. And heaven recognizes that, you know, after the lights turn off and from the worship service and the people exit the sanctuary, after we close our eyes at night, one of the things that keep us up is money and money worries and money troubles. And I believe there's more hope than that. And I believe that we are wired for inheritance. We are wired for wealth. And I do believe that it is God's will that we're able to attain it. Now, again, that's a very different proposition. I don't believe necessarily like, you know, just think it and positive, you know, the power of positive thinking, make money come to you, prosperity preaching. I'm just talking about real divine wiring. You know, just simple story of Adam in the garden. Look at that. It's an entrepreneur story. It's a hustler story. God places a man with no formal education in the Garden of Eden, gives him some raw materials and supplies and say, go at it. And the Bible says, and Adam worked that thing. He worked it. So it's in our DNA. So we're divinely wired for this. And I just believe that particularly for the people of color and African-American people passionately, there's a day here. This is a moment for us. And I believe that we've been through a lot and for this season. And I don't think that wealth gap is going to be as traumatic now that we have made the rally cry. I think we're going to spread this message like wildfire to know that God really has a place for us to have a seat at the political table, the economic table, the social table, and everything, so our voices can be heard. That is the will of God. I will not apologize about that to anybody.
Don't be. We do have a viewer that wants you to repeat the proverb that you mentioned about leaving an inheritance.
Oh, yes. Proverbs 13 and 22. 13 and 22.
And what was it?
Proverbs 13:22 says, good people leave an inheritance for their grandchildren, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for good people.
Ooh, 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 ooh.
So it's about getting yourself in position, right?
That's right. That's right. You know, sticking on the subject just about faith, you know, as a bishop, you know, in a global organization, what do you feel the Black church's role is when it comes down to financial healing with people of color? Because I'll tell you, sometimes churches get a bad rep, right? Like, you know, you go, you give your money and the pastor's not really doing what he's supposed to do with it. But what do you feel is the church's role?
Well, the church has a primary role, and particularly the Black church, because the Black church is really one of the guardians of Black culture. Black churches are guardians of Black culture. It's a place where Black culture emanates from, and you see it flow into the style of music, our voices, the way they sound, even the food we cook, the Sunday dinners, right? Dr. J. Paul Hines, he's a professor at Princeton. He says, if you want to do anything with Black people in this country, you still have to go through a Black church. Right? And so his research talks about that. And I think the Black church has always been a place, even back in slavery, where it's this concept of the Black church is here. Black churches are here to help us make that journey out of Egypt, out of bondage and into the promised land. And so, but I do think Black churches have to be challenged, right? Because pastors need to get bigger than talking about giving and bigger than talking about tithing and I think there needs to be a shift, particularly after COVID-19. That's a game changer, right? Black folks are already struggling. We're economically suffering even more because what Donald Trump didn't say to anybody while he claimed his economy was doing great, it wasn't doing all that great for Black folks. Okay. Unemployment in the Black community was still higher than any other community. Home ownership was still lower, and access to capital was still restricted, right? So I think the church being on the front lines of Black culture and where Black people need it most, located geographically in places that are underserved predominantly, right? So, but I think the mentality I'm asking Black pastors to have is a shift from building buildings to building people, and put building people over building buildings. Because if Black churches start addressing wealth disparity, if they don't start it, people are going to leave. And we already see this, by the way, sidebar. We're seeing this in our communities because Black professionals have been leaving Black churches. and going to other churches and then draining their brain resources and talent and capital into white churches that are more diverse. And yet then the Black church stays underserved, but the Black church is more than likely the one that's going to help somebody with their light bill.
Mm.
So either we become part of the solution, and this is the lane, by the way. So for Black pastors that have asked me, well, what do I do? I remember in the summer, I had a lot of calls. I was counseling a lot of pastors because their congregants was like, we're marching. Pastor, what you going to do? What you going to do? Because you see, I'm out there marching. I have my purple bishop shirt on, my cross, my collar, and I'm out there in the hot summer, fist raised. And I said, well, that may not be the lane for everybody and every pastor, but a lane you can have is to help heal your people and bring them into financial wellness. If you don't do it, you now miss the connection to the activism community. You now miss a connection to the political community, and you now miss a connection to the hearts of your people, because this is the biggest problem they have when we finish singing the song. You just shaking your head at me now.
You just opened up a whole can of worms. I'm going to get with Cordelia and Deidre. Like, we did part 2 to talk about buildings and people now. Okay, that's
Powerful.
very, very, very powerful. We only have 4 minutes left, and there is one question. I personally resonate with your story. I didn't file bankrupt at the age of 22, but I had nothing, and I started a business with $4,000 in back child support. And I some days stand and look at all that God has blessed me with. And I am in absolute awe, to your point, of being in that Garden of Eden, being given those raw materials and being able to build something great. I've also been in the position where I've worked extremely hard and I've lost it all. But I would like for those that are viewing and that are with us to at least get an answer to this question. What do you say to someone that has worked really hard? Right now with COVID, many people have lost their jobs and are trying to figure out their way. Some people have lost their businesses. How do you discuss about, for those that have lost it all?
Yeah. And I think the first thing is, and I really want to tie this, together real neatly. I would say to the person who's lost it all is that don't let your past predict your future, and don't let your past dictate and control your future. And I know that in the first response I often get as well, that's easier said than done. But all great things require hard work. All great things require great faith, and all great things require hope. And so the best thing I would say to them is, sure, you can get access to money, you can get the new job. But for you to have the passion and the energy to run at that and be high octane, you got to have hope restored. And no matter what you've been through, don't count yourself out. Don't count out the blessings that are available for you. Don't count out the heart of God to see you have more. I'm telling you right now, do what I did, do what Tawana did. Do the work on yourself, okay? And work on you, but also give yourself some grace and some space to be healed. And realize it's not over yet. And there's a whole community of people that are waking up to all these things that we're talking about today. And we're going to help walk you through it. That's why I'm also asking Tawana people to go to my website, theculturemoney.com, and take the pledge, right? Because the pledge brings accountability. And I think we want 1 million people to take that pledge, because I believe I think that number is significant enough for our community that if you see 1 million people are also in this with you, that'll also help restore your hope. And on your roughest day, realizing that you're not in this by yourself. And we're going to give you all the assistance you need so that your hope can be restored. That's where you start, if that's you.
Thank you. Well, it is 2:59 and this hour went by very quickly. And I did not think that would be the case, just talking about money. And there's still so many things that I want to ask. But I do want to ask all of you that are watching to go take the pledge. If we're in a position right now where we're getting ready to see the biggest shift in generational wealth, let's roll up our sleeves and do the work to ensure that we're not having this conversation 10 years, 15, 20 years from now. Bishop, author, doctor, pastor, brother, friend, thank you for coming back and speaking on this matter today. I am so grateful to have this book. I will be continuing to dive in, and I hope that all of you will go to the website and purchase it as well. We are now going to head on over to networking. For those of you that are not familiar with how networking works, you will look at the left side of your screen, and on the left side of your screen, you will see the handshake. If you are on social media, It is free to network. Go on over and register. You will hit the networking icon. It'll bring you to a screen. It will ask you if you're ready. If you are ready, click the blue button and you will have 3 minutes to get to know someone that you don't know, or perhaps someone that you've met at one of our previous networking functions. And if the two of you want to stay in contact with each other, then hit the blue connect button at the top of your screen. Think of it as like business cards when we were back at trade shows and real conferences. Their contact information will land in your dashboard for you two to stay in contact. Thank you so very much again, Bishop. Thank all of you for tuning in this week's Digital Dialogue series. I very much forward to seeing you same place next week, same time as we get again. Take care.